Welcome to the land of no easy answers. I'm Alex Knight, your producer, and I'm joined by Kristin Rumohr, Master of Psychology.
Hello.
And in the other corner, her test subject, Aaron Stewart.
What?
That's you. That's you, buddy.
He wasn't supposed to know he's being observed.
That's you, buddy.
Yeah, and the whole point of being an unwitting test subject is the unwitting part.
That's correct. So today,
Ruined the results.
Let's get serious for a moment, because this is not a happy subject. This is
probably going to be about the happiest point of the podcast here. So just to warn everybody.
This is a bit of a bummer, and For anyone that lives in the U.S. that may be listening to this, I'm sure there's a lot of Canadian news that just doesn't trickle down below the border here, so you probably are not aware of this.
We have fans in Japan, too,
but
buddy.
Our American friends are no stranger to the atrocities of the past, of colonialization and what's happened in their past, and it's very similar here in Canada. Over the course of, I don't remember the exact timeline, let's say the last 6 months, they have discovered, just in this province of British Columbia alone, several schools where they have uncovered hundreds of bodies of dead Indigenous children. And the church hasn't really taken any kind of accountability other than, I think they've apologized. That doesn't really cut it.
No, they have
That'll never.
No, they never did.
They haven't? Okay,
No.
I thought I heard that they did. Somebody did.
No, in fact, the Indigenous First Nations delegation has a meeting scheduled with the Pope in December, where they're going to try to convince the Pope to say, I guess, sorry for killing all of your children and trying to wipe out your entire civilization. I mean,
well, that's the question that I have is, what do we do going forward? Because we have to do something, right?
That is.
And
before we get too into it, we should give some background for those that maybe don't know about it, right?
Let's do
we just
that.
kind of hopped right in. Dead
Please.
children, what?
Yeah, oh, by the way.
Canada has a pretty terrible, dark history involving our Indigenous First Nations people. Again, we're not alone in this. Lots of countries have done similar sort of things. But the government decided that the First Nations were too primitive to exist, and that it was their right to take away children from their homes completely unwillingly and put them into what we called the residential schools to try and assimilate them into Canadian culture. These schools were, of course, run by the Catholic Church, so priests, nuns.
Some of them were.
Most of them, I think, were run by the church.
I think it was 50% Catholic, and then a lot of the other church communities, Pentecostals, Anglican, blah, 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 were helping out. But yeah, like you said, it was mostly Catholic.
Yeah, so church run regardless. And they were just appalling conditions that these kids were subjected to, right? Lack of food, basic hygiene, clean water, things like that. And the reality is a lot of these kids never came home. And the devastation of, being a parent where your child is literally ripped away from you with absolutely no permission asked of you, and then you never see them again. There's no news. There's not even the courtesy of, hey, your child passed away. You just don't know what's happened. And now we're talking, a century or so later, we're starting to uncover these mass graves. And the more that we're looking, the more we're finding. So we've just kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. And that's where we're starting off with this, right?
Yeah. And that's, and it wasn't just, it was the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was our police system going to Indigenous families and taking, and 150,000 of them are counted for. Right. That's not counting the ones that, they may have taken and weren't necessarily accounting for, because the whole point, like the quote unquote mission of the residential schools, was to essentially kill the Indian in the child. And that's the part that just, they treated them as savages. They would pierce their tongues with needles if they spoke their native languages. They were not allowed to send letters to their families. They were treated as subhuman. And then when they died of, mysterious circumstances, they were just thrown into unmarked graves. And the part that appalls me the most is that people who have history degrees from Canada in Canadian history have never heard about this. The idea that it has been just erased from the collective memory of Canada is just, I have no words for just the grief and just mind-shattering numbness that they must just go through on a daily basis, that this is what it took for us to actually go, oh, wait a minute, I guess all this time that they've been saying that they have been mistreated, maybe it's because we were mistreating them?
And we should say that these residential schools were operational up until, I think, the mid-90s.
150 years?
I mean, so this is fairly recent that, within the last couple decades, we were still doing this.
Yeah. And again, I would say that a lot of the, things that underlined why they started up in the first place are continuing to this day. And again, the idea that we have done, they laid out, I think 10 years ago, there were a whole bunch of calls to action, and we have literally followed none of them. Mm-hmm. And that's been, their communities are still, half of them don't have running water. They're under water advisories where they have to boil their own water. We haven't even set them up with the community that any one of us would fucking expect from our government.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, what our government did was just dehumanize them from the start.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that laid the foundation for the average Canadian's way of thinking. Right? It's like you said, we're not taught this in our standard schools. We didn't know about this history. Yeah. And when that's ingrained into all of us, there is this underlying racism towards our Indigenous communities. A lot of people think of them still as savages, primitive, lesser than, because of what our government has set up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that we need to address here moving forward, is the idea that we've already helped you out. What do you mean? We give you handouts, you have your own space, right? And we're living on the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. Which is still their land.
And that's the
right?
part that
I mean,
right?
how generous of us to give them a piece of their own land.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think of our Justin Trudeau, of like his response, of the Prime Minister's response to this thing? It's obviously incomplete. I mean, they say this is ongoing, right? Mm-hmm. But he did.
Well, yeah. And the problem
is the scope of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to be faced with that, what do you do in the grand scheme of this right now?
Well, he's in a difficult position too.
Doing.
But everyone looks, as the Prime Minister of the country, everyone looks to that person for direction.
Yeah. That's my problem here, is that I just look at, if you're not.
So what is the direction?
If you're not doing everything to take care of these people, then we need to find someone who will.
Yeah.
If we're still having to have a question of why do they not have running water?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say to you.
Yeah.
I just don't.
And if you're afraid of losing your voter base by taking care of your own citizens, well, then that's a much larger problem.
And again, so we the last episode on heat waves, and how these are going to devastate us who happen to have, we live in a happy space where I have AC. I can afford an AC unit. I only have one room of it, right? But I also figure that were I to spend the extra to heat to cool off this whole place, it'd be a waste of energy anyway, right? So I hope that I could just keep it to, but there are people who have none of that. None of it, and no access to, they don't even, if you can't get them running water, how are we supposed to expect them to survive a heat wave? If their communities don't have doctors, if they don't have access to, and they can't get a hold of, and they have no, and so what do you expect from them other than for them to act like, and then you get all upset when they stage a protest just to say, hey, there's been, and let alone this murdered and missing Indigenous women thing where they just disappear. And I had to have a literal argument with a guy the other day who said to me that maybe they just didn't want to be found, and I almost smacked him upside the head. I'm trying to be very, understanding here from people who are saying things that just, I feel like we can't allow to continue. Right? The idea that they were trying to flee something, like, I just
No, I completely agree with you.
The problem is the propaganda machine has been so effective. Once you dehumanize someone, it's just so easy. And that's the problem. We don't recognize that this happens. And unless it's, you're finding 715 unmarked graves of children that were just tossed into, this is what it takes for us to go, wait, if that happened to us, I'd feel like really, and I'd be upset. That'd be so. If that were to happen, maybe that's why they're upset. I can't. No, I mean that it wouldn't. No, that can't be equivalent here. Like they're not really human, are they?
Mm-hmm.
And also remember too that even though what happened in the past with these residential schools and how these children were taken away from their families. Remember, there are still people alive to this day that went through that and survived. Mm-hmm. And this is still a raw thing. And this, even though, decades have passed, you don't fucking forget that.
Well, and that's the other problem, is that the Catholic Church has destroyed most of the records, as has the Canadian government. A lot of the records of these schools have been just gone. They've wiped out.
Conveniently being just disappeared.
And again, so looking at this, and again, I have no idea what you are going through. If you are listening to this and think that I'm trying to, I have no words to express.
We're just trying to understand that. We're just trying to understand this,
thing, right? But just the idea that you have to wait for the Catholic Church to even accept culpability, because then they'd be afraid of you having the power to actually come and try to hold them accountable for this. I just meanwhile the church is supposed to be saving your children, and pedophilic priests, and we have records of, and you keep doing this, and somehow we're still allowing this to continue. It boggles my imagination. Mm-hmm. And excuses and just an obfuscation and destroyed records, and we're just supposed to ignore this and allow you to just be like, oh God, please save us.
This is meant to be like our words. The moral high ground is meant to be the church, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to look up to this as the standard for, being human. And this is what's happening.
And why can't they say that? Yeah. Well, I don't understand what's so hard about that. Why can't they just come out and say, look, Kristin, I think what you said makes perfect sense about taking the moral high ground route, and clearly, historically, that's not obviously the case. They've proven time and time again. I mean, and not just Christianity, but you can look at many religions where how many violent acts have been enacted, in the name of a god, right? And so why is it so difficult for them to just come out and say to your face, look, we are not going to mince words. Violent acts have been created, and it's been our fault.
Yeah, and that's my problem. Like,
this is not something. I mean, what the Prime Minister has also said too, that Canada, he's even said in his own words that Canada has a dark past. Why can't the church just say that? It's like, look, we fucked up. Yeah. We fucked up.
Liability.
I think it's part of humanity, right? Like everyone wants to do things in the name of the higher good. Right. And we have these kind of confirmation biases within our own brains to believe that what our opinion of the best and highest good must be the absolute truth, the universal truth, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we have a tendency to just like cling to that so vehemently that you're willing to fight for it instead of just realizing, okay, maybe we had the best intentions starting off, but we failed spectacularly, and we need to have some accountability for that. Because really, if you want to be moral and you want to be human, then you need to move forward, learn from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunately hits, I think, upon the exact problem of why the church will never accept liability or responsibility for this, right? Mm-hmm. We trusted them, right? We gave them the power to take children away from their families, regardless of their background, regardless of where they came from. We, the people, gave our government the power to take away someone's children.
Yeah.
You know, and again, to not equivocate on this, whether we gave it to the Catholics or whoever, we trusted them.
Yeah.
And so the idea was for the best.
And that's the thing. So regardless of whether it was for the best or not, we trusted them to do this. And the idea that they have now tried to skirt responsibility for, you know, just proves that they were not worth trusting in the first place.
I don't trust religion, period. Obviously there are lots of local communities that have good churches that people with lots of people that do good things. Well, but there's fun. Religion to me is just fundamentally flawed. But irrespective of my own personal feelings about religion, trust is a two-way street. I would trust them more if they were transparent. I would trust them more if they would own up, if they would take accountability and not try to sweep things under the rug. I would prefer if they just came out in front of this and say, yeah, we have a dark past. We fucked up. We made a lot of mistakes. Children suffered. We need to do better. We will do better. I would have more respect for them if they did that.
Let's just throw this question out there. You know, how many people have died due to religion? And let's just compare that to how many people have died due to atheism.
Can't think of one.
Right? I mean, realistically, you know, what large scale war has ever been mounted on the cause of I don't believe in a God at all?
Mm-hmm. If anything, I've seen people. Okay, now get this. I've seen, and this is really sad, I've seen people of faith who have lost their faith that are now atheists, who have been completely ostracized by their communities, who now suddenly their church doesn't talk to them. Their family, their own fucking family won't talk to them. Okay?
And so that's the problem with religion is it's all or nothing. And people keep going, oh, what are you talking about? I go, no, the problem with religion is you have to believe all of that religion with all of your heart, or else you're apparently not doing it right.
And I want to point out there's a big difference between religion and spirituality. Yeah. Right? So you can absolutely believe in higher power, right? Mm-hmm. And be spiritual, but there is that line. So like you're saying, Aaron, religion means then adhering to kind of the dogma of
organized
specific. Yeah, exactly. Someone, a mortal being has sat down and wrote out these rules in which you're supposed to live by and then called it divine, right?
Mm-hmm. But it's usually at the expense of.
Well, yes.
The problem is that it's inclusive of those who believe in that religion, and everybody who doesn't believe in that religion is evil with a capital E. And that's my problem with it. Atheists are happy to let you believe what you want. I'm not going to kill you over that. You have been going out and killing each other because your God told you to for millennia. And we're just supposed to allow you to just continue with this exact same mentality that you are superior because you believe this and everybody else must be inferior.
Yeah. And when the actions of, this specific church constantly are, always in disparity when it's here's all the rules that are constantly being broken, instead of just living up to it and saying, okay, these don't work. right?
By the moral authority.
Like you say, you've got priests diddling little boys. You have within these, even residential schools, you got the priests and the nuns hooking up that are then aborting children to add to the mass graves. How about we just step back, church, and say this doesn't work, right?
When
How
it's all
can there
based
be a
on
better
rules from 2,000 years ago that they're just like, no, these are the rules. And I go, but no, in your book says this and this and this and this. So you're going to stone your wife if she says something bad to you? Because that's in the Bible, right? Like, we're going to murder these people and take these people out, and God will cause a flood. And like, come on, guys, seriously. Right? Like, you can absolutely hold the idea that there are parts of this book that are absolutely worth keeping and parts of it that you can absolutely just discard. Right? And again, the problem with religion is that it wants you to not discard those stupid pieces, but somehow make those work in this framework of faith. Right? Regardless of all evidence to the contrary. A guy talked to a burning bush. A guy lived inside a fish for 3 fucking days without food or water. What?
Yeah. Oh, like, we're going on a bit of a tirade about religion now.
No, this is absolutely not, because it's residential schools. And again, the problem with the residential schools was the fucking religion.
Of course it was.
I think the problem kind of arises, which encompasses religion, of course, as well. The idea that any human or group of humans can control another human's morality. Yeah. And that's where it all falls apart.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And let's not forget, too, that there's still racism hasn't been solved. It hasn't gone away. I still hear all the time, if you eavesdrop on conversations, you hear comments being made about Indigenous people. That's just disgusting, right?
That you wouldn't allow people to say about your people,
Yeah.
And that's my thing. Like, if this were the whites saying this, And it's just,
Well, everyone's met that guy, right? The middle-aged white man that's racist to everyone else, but the second you say something against him, whoa, nope, that's not happening.
And that's, again, the problem is that you now you must defend these rules at all cost. And that's part of this religion. That's why people get ostracized when they leave it. Is because you must defend the religion. Right. And the idea that someone got out of it because they don't believe it anymore is contrary to this whole thing. God knows the answers. What do you mean you're leaving?
Yes, but even within religion, though, there are people of faith that have that cherry pick stuff, that they choose to take the best of the Bible and discard the rest. So even within religion, they do that. Right?
Yes. But that's
exactly, it's not an all or nothing thing for a lot of people.
And that's exactly the problem, right? And so they're, again, cherry picking little bits and pieces, which is fine. But then if you're using that to justify the murder of others.
I think, again, it goes back to any time you think you hold the moral high ground, right? So regardless if that's you adhering to the dogma of religion, cherry picking, being atheist, whatever it is, if you think that you are superior to another human being, that's where it gets dangerous. And that's what's been drilled into us as Canadians.
Well,
right?
that's
From,
how you get
centuries ago.
It starts with that and narcissism, fascism. I mean, that's all rolled in together, right? So,
so what do we do about this is then the question, right? Like, how do we start to remove this self-serving, bullshit from our standard way of life?
Well, for one thing, we can have better reparations.
And
we can employ, within government, make sure that Indigenous people are well representative, that they're contributing to decisions in policies, that they're being consulted on things, and like you said, making sure that all these communities too, making sure that these people, that nobody's living in poverty. How about that?
Well, and that's my, I call it walk the path. Right? They have given us the instructions, and the problem is that we're not walking the path with them. Like the call to actions that they have given us are really not unreasonable for any, group that should, expect the same rights of any other group in Canada. That's the problem here. All they're asking for is the same rights that you have been given. And we have been denying them that. And again, this idea that we have not followed through on any. And I mean, sure, there might have been a couple that we've done some things on, but the idea, I'm pretty sure from their perspective, is that we haven't done any of this yet. And we need to. We need to listen. We need to start just shutting the fuck up and letting them tell us what we need to do, because unfortunately, our voices haven't helped them at all at this point. And we just need to listen to them and let them hopefully heal and just let them know that we are here to help you heal, and we'll do whatever we need to do, right? Like GoFundMe is not going to fucking fix this problem, right? This needs to be a concerted effort that we all need to start doing something about this, because that is a root of an issue that we are going to need to address moving forward. Climate change is going to be driving more people who didn't start living here originally into our countries. And we are going to have to start reconciling the idea of what is mine and what is ours and what is yours, and start changing these conversations so that we have a more inclusive ours that doesn't include us disregarding calls to action from people who have been murdered by our government.
Well said.
Now, I thought I actually.
I don't think I could. I don't think I could say any. I don't think I can add anything that. I managed to get through that whole thing without getting just the angry, yeah. This is just so frustrating for me. Again, I started learning about this 3 years ago in my last podcast where this was the first I'd ever heard about it. And so I actually set out to try to learn something. Hey, and the idea that it has just not moved anywhere up until now, and just. Yeah. The sheer lunacy of 150,000 children. Yeah. If we were to walk into any city in Canada no other way to
and start pulling children out, what would you guys like? You guys would just be like, all right, have a good time.
Yeah.
And then, you never got a letter back from them. And let alone if those families went to the school to just hang out up on top of the hill just to see if they could catch a glimpse of them, they would send the fucking RCMP out to chase them away.
Yeah. Yeah, guaranteed. If those were white children, there'd be people with pitchforks and they'd be burning shit down. That much is true.
And we can talk about different times and all, but I always find it funny how the older generation talks about the better times back in the day. And I just go, when none of the Indigenous people were around for you to have to worry about them saying something about you taking their land. We're on a forward progressive path here. And I really think that this hopefully will be a turning point where we can understand that this is something that we need to rise up to, not feel crushed down by. Right? This is not taking anything away from us. This is simply doing what we were supposed to have done in the first place.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's not taking anything away from us.
No. This is something that our government could, through our taxes, absolutely take care of tomorrow if we were to push forward on the initiative of making it happen. And the idea that we are relying on the Indigenous people to do this for themselves is lunacy.
Yeah.
Right? This is our call to action. I'm unfortunately bad for, sitting on my ass, and this is something that I feel I need to get up and move on. So I'm hoping that we can hopefully get some of you involved as well. We'll try to post some websites for Indigenous action communities and places where we might be able to actually try to find some way of lending some sort of support for people who obviously deserve it and need it right now. Hey,
absolutely.
And our hearts and our souls go out to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's a
back
bummer.
To the happy.
That was a bit of a bummer. But hey, we gotta. we don't come here.
We're not here to have the easy conversations.
That's right. I was just going to say, we don't come here every week to make our jobs easier. If anything, we do need to talk about these difficult topics, have these difficult conversations. That's what this is about. That's how progress is made, God damn it.
Well, the only way they get easier is if you start having them.
Yeah.
They're going to stay hard if we just never have these conversations, let alone if we never listen to one another to see if that other person might actually have a point.
And silence doesn't solve injustice.
No,
it really doesn't.
That's exactly why we had to do this today, was to just start just saying, hey, that's enough, man. We need to start doing something, and it needs to start now, because yesterday was too late.
Sometimes you just got to uncover the wound to let it heal.
Yeah.
And again, this hopefully will make the next conversation easier when they find another, because there will be more. There were hundreds of these schools across Canada. And so the fact that we have only found 3, I've gone to 4 different schools now, and there they are. There they are, right where we said they were, right? Yeah. The idea that this isn't at all or most of, or at least some of the other ones is short-sighted.
Yeah.
And again, the idea that this is the end of this needs to get out of our minds, because this is just the beginning, and the only way forward for here is for us to start offering a hand, that we have taken from them and denied them. Sorry.
It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful, right? But it
doesn't need to be. That's
well, the way I look at it, right? I like to use the wound analogy, right? Let's say you've got like a deep festering wound, right? And you just keep throwing Band-Aids on it, right? You might get a surface level, but the infection is still there. So it's going to keep coming back. At some point, you got to reopen the wound and actually treat it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pour the antiseptic, feel the sting to actually let it heal properly. And I think that's the level we're at. It's going to get messy, right? But we need to feel that. And we can't be afraid. We can't just keep throwing Band-Aids on things and thinking it's all right.
See, you go internal with that one. I tend to go with an external analogy on that. Right now, we have a gigantic pile of shit lying in the middle of our room. And we have the option of either walking around that pile of shit and just ignoring the smell as if it didn't exist, or we could clean that shit up. Those are our choices, and unfortunately we have had too many years of just ignoring that big pile of shit lying in our room. We put it there.
Or burying it. I mean, you bury it and
And that's the thing, like this should be our call to action, right? Yeah. And I would implore everyone, if you're in Japan, if you're in Belgium, if you're listening to this is something that we've all had to suffer through. We all have our own little bits and pieces of this that our history has played out as well, right? So this is, hopefully our struggle can help everyone around the world to start to deal with our own universal struggle. Okay? And how we can use this as an example of how Canada rose up to save our people, and how our people stood up for the rest of our people and made a difference in their lives, that the rest of the world could be something to, hold up as an example of what to do when you uncover hundreds of grave sites of children. This is our time to actually do something. And again, this doesn't have to be the hard conversation. It's already been the hard conversation. Now we have to start doing.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't thoughts and prayers time, unfortunately. So again, we'll try to find some ways that we can actually throw them up. We'll this is something we're going to come back to, because like I said, this isn't the end of this one. So hopefully we'll have some better news and can make it more fun next time.
That's right. And it isn't the end of this podcast. We release episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. Make sure you hit subscribe and you will be notified when we release these things. If you have a suggestion on a topic that you would like us to discuss, the place for that is in the comments right below here. We have audio versions of this podcast if you prefer that for your morning commute. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn and Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Alexa, every single platform you can think of. We are there for you. We're also there for you on social media. We're at The Subvert Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can also subscribe to our blog, where the website is thesubvertpodcast, all one word.com. That's the place to go for that. And before you go, just remember, we're all fucked up, so let's be fucked up together. Bye.